Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about what the best diet is to gain muscle and lose fat. So the first most important thing to understand is that when it comes to fitness, when it comes to dieting, the most important principle above all else is sustainability. So if the current diet you're following right now you can't see yourself sticking to for the long term, then it's best to take a step back, reevaluate things, and find a diet that you can actually sustain for the long term. Because the reality is, whatever you used to get in shape, training and nutrition wise, is what you're going to need to sustain for as long as you want to remain in shape, which is of course your entire life. So if you don't see yourself sticking to the current diet plan you're on for the entirety of your life, then it's not the right diet plan for you. And I've tried all the different diet plans pushed by the fitness industry and all the different extreme fads and all this bullshit, and they never worked for me. I could never sustain them for long enough, because you can't just sustain something for 1 month or even 6 months. You need to sustain it for years and years and years if you want to truly see the best results. So what I found to be the most effective is not abiding by certain rules and strict guidelines, but rather abiding by principles. So principles are incredible when it comes to fitness. Abiding by principles rather than guidelines is super key, because principles are malleable and can be adjusted to one's lifestyle and preferences. So if you rely on principles instead of all these guidelines, you're gonna have plenty of flexibility when it comes to your diet, your nutrition plan, and your fitness plan, because it doesn't really need to be that strict. So there's really just a few principles that you need to adhere to, and the rest outside of these principles, anything else doesn't matter. It's not going to make a big impact, because these are the principles that create the biggest impact, and they're the ones that you should actually pay attention to, because diluting your effort among different guidelines and rules is just making things more complicated than they need to be, and it's going to destroy your ability to sustain things, because you're not going to be able to see yourself sticking to it for a long period of time. So it's important to abide by the right principles, but then adjust it to the way you want, because that's the beautiful thing. It can be adjusted to anyone's lifestyle, and there's no such thing as a perfect diet. You know, there can be so many different ways that someone would go about hitting these principles. You know, people can still abide by the same principles, but go about hitting them in many different ways, which is the beautiful thing about it. So when it comes to the principles, the first main principle is your calorie intake. So the first step you want to really take is to find your maintenance calorie level. So this is going to be roughly 14 to 16 calories per pound of body weight for most people. This is a good starting point, and finding your maintenance calories is really the key first step, because from that point on you have the power to go ahead and manipulate your caloric intake and your body composition as a result. So if you're going to want to lose fat, you're going to want to put yourself in a small calorie deficit. If you want to gain muscle, you're going to need to put yourself in a calorie surplus. So really finding that maintenance is the first step from which you can go on and then adjust based on your goals. So the way that you want to go about doing this is to, if you're very active, pick 16 and multiply it by your body weight, and that's your maintenance calories roughly. And if you're less active, you're more sedentary, take 14. And then you're going to want to go on what I call a track and observe period, which is basically where you take 3 weeks and you're going to want to track your calories closely every day and weigh yourself every day. You want to track your calories, and then you're going to observe how the scale changes over the period of 3 weeks. You want to take the average of your weight from week 1, week 2, and week 3, and if it stays relatively the same or just fluctuates, you know, like 1 pound or so, then you've found roughly your maintenance intake. So that's an important step, because sometimes body weight multipliers are just not accurate for people who have really high metabolisms or slow metabolisms. So it's important to really adjust it to the way your body actually your body's real needs. So that period of time is very important, the track and observe period, and then from that point on you can adjust to where you want. And that's a habit that's going to be really important to get used to doing, is tracking your calories, especially at the beginning. So if you know how many calories you're eating and you can do that consistently, then you have the power to manipulate your body composition however you want. But the beautiful thing about tracking is that after doing it for a certain period of time, you're going to notice that you naturally gravitate towards certain foods and meals, and you're going to get a good grasp of their caloric value. And then from that point on, you can kind of eyeball things if you don't like necessarily tracking calories. Because I remember back when I was starting fitness, I hated tracking calories, but now it's more of just a habit, and it's really not a pain in the ass for me anymore. So I just do it because I like the reassurance of knowing how many calories I'm eating, knowing that I'm on point. But the important thing to note as well is that no matter how well you track your calories and how well you keep an eye on that and dial in on that, you're not actually going to know exactly how much you eat. It's always going to be off, whether it's up or down. It's never going to be exactly how much you think, even if you're tracking everything to the last decimal. So don't stress too much about that. And the next principle is your protein intake. So you're gonna want to ensure you're getting enough protein, but optimal protein intake for muscle growth is no more than 0.82 grams per pound of body weight. I stick between 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight just to give myself a little range, but you won't experience any more muscle growth benefits from going above 0.82 grams per pound of body weight. When you're cutting, there's some reason to believe that keeping the protein intake could be a little bit higher, could be beneficial for reasons like satiety and its thermogenic effects. So protein can be kept slightly higher on cuts if you want, but again, like anything higher than 0.82 grams per pound of body weight is not going to have a significant effect on muscle growth. And then the next principle, and you guys will notice, macros are not one of these principles because macros actually do not really matter very much. The only macro that's important is the one we just talked about, which is protein. Protein is the only macronutrient that's going to have a significant effect on your body composition. Carbs and fats should not be tracked because when it comes to sustainability, tracking your macros and trying to hit a certain like exact split is a pain in the fucking ass. And it's not something that you're gonna be able to sustain for long periods of time, nor is it necessary, or nor does it create a very big impact. So it's not necessary to worry about that. As far as tracking goes, you just wanna track your calories and your protein and let the carbs and fats fall where they fall. So macros are not one of the important split. What's more important, this carries me into the last principle, is eating whole foods, eating a micronutrient dense diet, because micronutrients actually have a much higher effect on your overall health in your body than focusing constantly on macros. So micronutrients are critical for your overall health, well-being, energy, focus, output, and they're extremely important for your hormonal levels, your testosterone levels. So it's really, really important to put more of an emphasis on getting proper micronutrients, and you don't have to track micronutrients either. You don't have to track the mineral content and the vitamins and all of that. What you want to do is just ensure that your diet is filled with whole foods for the most part. So eating a diet filled with whole nutritious foods, fruits, vegetables, lean animal proteins, rice, legumes, potatoes, all of those good things, that's going to naturally ensure you're getting the right micronutrient intake. So you don't have to worry about tracking because that's just not going to be beneficial for the sustainability side of things. But as long as you're hitting on those principles, guys, you don't need to worry about anything else. It's the minority of actions that creates the majority of the results, and there's always just a few key principles really for anything that need to be dialed in on, and then the rest doesn't really matter. It's not going to create that much of an impact. So those are the 3 most impactful things you can do with your diet plan, and outside of those, you can do whatever you want. As far as meal frequency goes, sometimes I eat 2 meals a day, sometimes I eat fucking 5. It really, really doesn't matter as long as those principles are in place. And that's the beautiful thing. This creates a lot of flexibility, a lot of freedom, and it allows you to sustain things because that's far more sustainable because you can do so much with those principles. You can do so much. They're not set in stone. They're not very restrictive. They're just simple principles that you need to abide by, stay consistent with. And really, it's the diet you stick to 80% of the time that matters. So if you fuck up 20% of the time, it's not that big a deal. I fuck up all the time. But what's important is that the next day you get right back on track and you ensure that at least 80% of the time you're sticking to that proper diet approach. It's okay to go off of it here and there. If 20% of the time you're fucking up, you're going off, it's not a huge deal. It's really 80% of the time the diet you stick to, that's what's going to really create your result. That's going to take care of the result. It's going to have the most impact. So that's as far as it goes for diet, guys. Do anything you want outside of that. Just ensure you're sticking to those principles consistently. And that's really it. If you guys want to pick up a free checklist, I built a muscle building checklist for natural lifters. Treat it as a self-assessment and make sure that you're not missing out on any of these fundamental principles and rules to building a great physique as a natural. So you can go through it. There are 13 points that if you're not hitting those points, you are sacrificing your muscle and strength gains as a natural. So you have to make sure that you're hitting those principles, you're staying consistent with them, and that your muscle building and strength building efforts are not going to waste. So definitely pick that up. Spend quite a bit of time creating it. It's really, really valuable. And you can pick it up for free. I'll send it straight to you, and we'll talk soon. Take care.